Welcome to CSEC Biology, the cover page. I am Mr. Wilson, and today we're doing an overview of the May, June 2016 Biology Paper 1. We're going to be looking at question 31 through to 60. You want to look at the link at the end of this video to find the first 30 questions. So indeed, you need to watch this video to the end so you can find the other 30 questions. Let's hop right into the video. Item 31. The essential vitamin and mineral salt required for blood clotting in human are A, vitamin A and magnesium, B, vitamin C and potassium, C, vitamin B and sodium, D, vitamin K and calcium. Which is going to be your answer? Well, here it is like from textbook, it's always going to be D for our answer, which is of course vitamin K for blood clotting and of course calcium. We move to question 32. Under which condition will the rate of transpiration in plants be highest? Now, one thing about the rate of transpiration, we could think about drying clothes on the line. What would have been the best condition for drying clothes? Of course, with the exception of the light intensity, which the plant would have dealt with it differently. Here our options are A, sunny and low wind speed, B, sunny and high wind speed, C, cloudy and low wind speed, D, cloudy and high wind speed. The answer here is going to be B, sunny and high wind speed, as a sunny day is of course going to cause that stomata to be open once it has not lost too much water, and of course the high wind speed would of course drive that removal of water, hence the rate of transpiration would of course be higher. Question 33. Translocation of sucrose in plants occur via specialized vessels, which are dead narrow cells. That sounds like the xylem to me, and that would have been transporting water and mineral up from the soil. B, are abundant in the mitochondria. Interesting. C, contain sieve pores in their end, and of course D, are thin hollow tubes of lignin. Here we're going to be going with C, contain sieve pores in their end wall. We're looking for the phloem here. So we move to question 34. Question 34. Which of the following options correctly matches the storage organ to their stored nutrient? So we are looking here at the root, the fruit, and the liver. Now, by matter of elimination, we could eliminate B and C, and of course we could look at A and D, as glycogen is a giveaway for the liver. We could also look at the fruit, and looking at the fruit there, we're seeing glucose and sucrose. Glucose is going to be out, fats is going to be out, so it leaves us with A as our answer for this particular question. We move now to question 35. The best description of a role of excretion in living organism is to A. Produce urine. It's not only urine that's produced. B. Produce feces. Feces is not an excretory matter, it's an ingested material. C. To get rid of toxic waste, that is plausible. And D. To get rid of excess water. The best answer here is of course going to be C. Getting rid of toxic waste, as of course toxic waste will of course harm the body. That is really the straight up definition or the reason for excretion. We look at question 36. Question 36 refers to the following diagram of a mammalian kidney, and we are looking at the nephron. It is also called the kidney tubule. Now we're looking at some labeled parts there, and which option correctly identifies the function of a parts labeled 1, 2, and of course 3. So we're looking at the Bowman's capsule at 1, we're looking at the proximal convoluted tubule at 2, and we are looking at the loop of Henle at 3. Now let us look at the table to see what's there for us to look at. Alright, so A, ultrafiltration, plausible for 1. Water conservation, that's out. Selective reabsorption, not the best thing there. Ultrafiltration for B, selective reabsorption, that sounds plausible. Under the influence of ADH for B, that sounds plausible to me. C, water conservation. I think our best answer here is going to be B. ADH to regulate the permeability of the loop of Henle. Selective reabsorption is taking place in the convoluted tubule, while we have ultrafiltration taking place between the Bowman capsule and the glomerulus. So we want to take note of that. So answer there, B. Moving on down to question 37. Question 37 reads, which of the following organ does the mammalian skeleton protect? Alright, so if you look at the diagram, the pancreas is somewhat behind the stomach, and it makes this a pretty tricky question if you ask me. The bladder falls right within the pelvic girdle there. If you were supposed to feel on your body, it would be just below your navel there, above your pubic area. That's where we would find the bladder. And the stomach, there's a part of the stomach that you can feel just below the sternum when you are doing that iamic maneuver. However, there's a portion that is pretty much seated behind the rib cage, right? So there's a portion behind the rib cage. So the best answer I think here is of course going to be A. Move on to question 38. Question 38. Which of the following correctly describe movement in plants? Now this is a question that is on almost all the multiple choice papers for the past couple of years. It suggests to me that we haven't had a good grasp at this question, and it might mean that you revise, go through this question with your many teachers and leave me something in the comment, or we can talk more about it as we have our live. But let us look at what I chose here. Now the question is changing slightly from paper to paper. In some cases it is talking about tropism, and in some cases, as it is here, it is saying which of the following correctly describe movement in plant. Now we have irreversible, whole or part movement. Now when a plant moves, is it irreversible? Now this is a really tough one for me, and I'm going to tell you why. If we're supposed to look at pretty much tropism when a plant moves and it turns towards the sunlight, if the sun changes direction, the plant will also change direction in order to get that sunlight, right? Now, whole or part movement. Now, is it irreversible? The root growing, the root will not really reverse. It will just continue to grow. The height of the plant will always be the height of the plant. It won't reverse. So, one of the things we could say, I can tell you it's a tough one for me. I'm always honest when it comes to these things. I would go with C, irreversible movement of the plant, and the irreversible here I'm looking at growth or part movement. So the growth of the plant could be irreversible, and of course there are, of course, in some cases it's pretty much part movement. But I'm going with C, but I want to hear what you have to say in the comment. I always want to hear from you when we answer these questions. It's not to say that it is all cast in stone, but it's what I think at the point I am answering the question, or what's in my head at the time I'm answering the question. Which of the following option best describes the term stimulus and response? This is a question that appears a couple of times as well, but this one is not so bad. Now, A is going to be O, because a stimulus is pretty much a detectable change in the environment, and response is what that organism will do as a result of that change in the environment. With that said, the only answer possible here is going to be, of course, D. Like I say, this is an easy one, but it too, it has made its round on the paper. We move on to question 40. Alright, interesting here. We want to look at this one. This one is another tricky one, but it too has made its round on the paper. Item 40 refers to the following diagram. We're seeing one there being the receptor. It's collecting that bit of information. And we're seeing the sensory neuron going there, and it forms pretty much a part of the spinal nerves. And we are seeing 3 there being the effector. Now our task is to find out which of the following option correctly identifies the structure labeled 1, 2, and of course 3. My answer, I've looked at A, B, and C, and of course I chose D, as 1 is of course the receptor, and we are going to have the spinal nerves. Now the relay or intermediate neuron would have been the same thing as the connector neuron, but based on what we're seeing here, if I'm seeing the diagram well, I'm not seeing that intermediate neuron. I'm seeing the continuation of the sensory neuron being connected into what could have been the motor neuron. So I am going to go with D, receptor, spinal nerves, effector. So the only problem here is 2 as to whether it is relay or spinal. Relay and intermediate is pretty much the same thing, but spinal nerve would have just taken in pretty much the collection of things happening there. Alright, so like I said, this question has made its round, and of course in some cases there's a slight change in the word, but I think that this is probably the closest we can get. You have to pay attention to what is happening at 2 to see whether or not there's a intermediate neuron in the middle there, or it's just a straight continuation of a process. Item 41 refers to the following diagram of the skin, and we have the epidermal layer there, and it wants us to find out the region which acts in a similar manner to sun protection factor. That sun protection factor cream, that part which would have been protecting the skin, and of course, should I say rebirth, the area there for pigmentation, we would be looking at 2, which is of course going to be B for this particular question. We move to item 42. The function of a choroid layer in the eye is to, we're looking at A, B, C, D, and of course focus light rays. No, that is not the function of a choroid. Prevent internal reflection, that seems plausible. Maintain the shape of the eyeball. No, that's a sclera. Control the amount of light entering the eye, that would have been the pupil. So we have the pupil, the sclera, the lens, and the choroid featured here. So the answer is of course going to be B. I will move to question 43. And 42 is a question that would have made its round on the paper as well. We would have seen 42 a couple of times. 43 features what we call a sigmoid growth curve. Refers to the following diagram, which illustrates a measurement of growth in living organisms. So we're looking at a measurement of growth in living organism. Now it requires some skills from your lab class. Which of the following is an incorrect label for the y-axis? And remember, we're looking at the axis. The axis at the bottom here is going to be the x, and the one at the top here is going to be of course the y-axis. Now usually we place the independent variable on the x-axis, and the independent variable here would have been time. So we go D as the answer for that, and we move to 44. This is of course another question that would have made its round on the paper. You probably need to check the responses on the other paper. I would have had dialogue with several persons, and again it's going to be at the direction, or should I say at what point you choose to start with this. I have seen responses for A, C, and D, which means that it is a troubled question, and I think I have gone with C before, and I have had dialogue with persons, and the G is considered to be a preferred answer. But like I've said, I've seen answer for A, C, and D. Again, I'm going to ask you to tell me in the chat what is your preferred answer. I'm going to go with D here. Alright, so tell me in the chat what's your preferred answer. Now I'm going to be looking at question number 45. So this is a revised position, so you would have seen us choosing C on other papers, but we want to revise that position based on a number of feedback and number discussion. We want to revise the position. Alright, so 45. Contraception is used primarily to, of course, this too is another question that would have made its round on the paper. And is it to limit the size of family? Is it to cause infertility? Definitely not to cause infertility. To prevent the spread of sexually transmitted infection? Not all contraceptives would do that. Increase the world population? No. But while this would have made its round on the paper, it is slightly different every time you see this particular question. So you want to ensure that you read the questions properly, and of course read the options. It's a multiple choice paper, and in some cases you might be lucky to get 100%. Sometimes you might get it very close. Now, where does fertilization of the egg cell or ovum occur in flowering plant? Where does fertilization occur? Now, let us not confuse ourselves with fertilization and pollination. Alright, So we have the stigma, we have the endosperm, we have the pollen grain. And the pollen grain, you know that it is pretty much a male reproductive part. So it would have, that would have grown down to the over there. So it's only possible that it could take place at D, the embryo sac. So I go with embryo sac as my answer here. And 47 refers to the following diagram of a flower. And of course, we would have been doing the flower since grade 7. I would have seen grade 7 students doing the flower. It wants us to find out which of the labeled part is responsible for the production of the male gamete. Alright, so that is very easy. It's going to be 2, the anther. That's going to be responsible for the male gamete. So it's the answer here is going to be B. Alright, so we move on down. 48. A vector is defined as an organism that bites a human. Well, the vector could bite human, but that is not the definition. Causes a disease. Does it really cause a disease? Interesting. Lives on other organism. That would have been more like a parasite. But a vector, what it really does is to transmit disease organisms. Alright, so you would have had the Anopheles and the Plasmodium. So it really transmit that disease causing agent. That is what a vector does. Alright, and that is the best way we could define a vector. We move on to 49. Which of the following organism transmit the yellow fever virus? Oh wow. Yellow fever. Alright, so colics, no. Filariasis, testifly, no. Anopheles, no. It's going to be the Aedes, which is responsible for yellow fever and dengue. So we go with D for 49. D for 49. And I want to hear from you in the comment. I really like to have the feedback, whichever way. Just be respectful when you go there so that we can continue to grow. Alright, which of the following are used in management of diabetes? This question too would have made its round on the paper. And like I say, in some cases there's a slight differences that you'd see from paper to paper. But you want to pay attention to this. I usually say to students, you can't go to the exam without knowing about hypertension and diabetes. These two diseases that are usually featured in almost all paper, be it bio or HSB. Now the answer here is definitely not meditation. I've never heard of anyone sitting down and meditating and this disease is all taken care of. I have heard about changing the diet and of course exercise. These could of course help you to overcome this ill. So I'm going to go with A as the answer here. Moving on to 51. Here we would have realized that our definition that we grew up with as chromosome as a culture of protein, we have to sort of upgrade that. 51. Which of the following option correctly describes DNA, chromosome, gene, and of course allele? I want us to pay attention to the word describe. So if we are going to be using describe, definitely we couldn't say that DNA, we couldn't use A as a response for DNA. That would have been out. Alright, and when we look at B, units of that's out. Allele, no. Allele has nothing to do with histone, no. C is pretty much plausible. Let us look at D. Nucleic acid that has all the genetic information. Looks good. The smallest unit, no, that is out. Once you have that there, indeed it is out. So we're going to go for C. C is going to be the most plausible answer here, fitting for all the terms at the top of the table. The others, they would have one or two things out, which makes C the most suitable answer here. All right, so we'll move on to 52. And for 52, as a result of mitosis, each daughter cell has, all right, daughter cell, as it were, from mitosis, daughter cells usually have the diploid number, which is the full number of chromosomes. All right, but let us look at what this question really wants us to do. As a result of mitosis, each daughter cell has variable number of chromosome, twice the number of chromosome, same number of chromosome as parents, half the number of chromosome as parents. So D would have been meiosis, and of course our answer here is going to be C, as it's the same number, the full number of chromosome diploid. So if you were supposed to think about yourself, you would have had 46, just like your parents would have had 46. Or if you got a cut and it got healed, then it's pretty much the same 46 that would have been in the new formation of skin there. All right, so 46, same number, diploid number. 53 is pretty much a genetic diagram that is required here. Tarzan and Jane, both of whom are heterozygous for blood group A and B respectively, can have offspring that are likely to be. All right, when we say that A and B is heterozygous, remember we're looking at codominance here. This is a particular cross that we're going to be doing, and if A is heterozygous, it means that the person has blood group AO, and B of course would have been BO, because the recessive allele here is of course going to be represented by blood group O. Now when we do this cross, I like to talk about drawing the Punnett square. We draw, to do this question, it would require us to construct a Punnett square, and a Punnett square is pretty much, should I say, a table that has 3 columns and 3 rows, where the first cell of that table to the left is usually blanked, and then as it were here we would have had A in the next cell and O in the other cell. And then for the first column, that's the top row we're doing just now, and for the first column we move on down to the second cell, we would have a B, and then to the other cell we have a O. Now wherever the top column and the column to the side meets, we are going to be placing the letters as it is here, and what we would find out is that we would have gotten AB, BO, AO, and OO. So that would have been D for our answer. It is always going to be 25, 25, 25, 25% across. All right, so you observe that when we started out, we didn't start with any O. You didn't see any O, but we ended with O because it was pretty much heterozygous here, meaning that it had the O there. But when we have the blood group O with AB, it's usually just represented with the A, and they might just say heterozygous. All right, but here we're having AB, and this is codominant. All right, great. You want to pay attention to that. Well, I know you would have completed your paper too. All right, 54. Zane, the son of Tarzan and Jane, may have inherited the red-green colorblind gene from his parents. Neither Tarzan nor Jane is colorblind. If N represents the allele for normal vision, and that's capital N, and common N represents the allele for colorblindness, the genotype of the parent would most likely be. All right, great. So just let me remind you that we have an entire video on the different types of genetic diagram for CXC. You could just visit my channel and click on the genetic playlist, and you'll see all these are well explained, so you could find more on it. So here when we talk about color blindness, this is a sex-linked inheritance. Alright, so it means that a female can be a carrier, and in this case the male is going to either have it or he doesn't have it. Sex link, or we could say it's an X-linked trait, where the trait is carried on the X chromosome. By now you'd have actually known that the male has only one X while the female would have had two. So to do this genetic diagram, we would find that I'm unable to do the drawing. I'm not so familiar with the program here. So the answer there would have been A. Like I say, you can find out more by going to my channel, and you'll see all the various diagrams for the genetic crosses. We're moving on to question 55. Variation in population is due to, interesting here, is it due to mutation? Is it due to crossing over? Crossing over, yes. Prophase 1, that is possible. Asexual reproduction doesn't bring about variation. Alright, random segregation, yes, that brings about variation. And the mutation, of course, will bring about or contribute to variation. So here the answer is, of course, going to be B. (56) Variation is important to population because it ensures diversity, conformity, no, adaptability. Variation is important to population because it ensures diversity. I like diversity, I like adaptability. Where there's variation, organisms become to, or they are able to adapt to the changes in the. Let's move on to 57. Speciation may be due to geographical isolation or behavioral differences. Speciation speaks to an organism pretty much evolving into should I say a new species. So when we get to species, we know that this refers to organism that only can interbreed and produce a viable offspring. So here our answer is going to be, of course, B. And we move to question 58. Which of the following is true about natural and artificial selection? Natural and artificial selection, that's going to be occurs in domestic population. Natural, no. B involves genetic modification. No. And I'm not reading because I expect you to be carrying through with me. The answer here for me is going to be C. Environment acts on population which adapts, and of course artificial selection, selective breeding for a particular trait like you would have had with horse racing. So C is going to be my answer here. For 59, which of the following is a ecological implication of genetic engineering? Implication, human playing God, that's why it's saying that it is unethical. Higher price of organic food, implication. Reduce incidence of allergic reaction. I'm going to go with A. Loss of biodiversity, because now you are just creating what you want and you're really not thinking about anything else in the ecosystem. So I'm going to go with that. Alright, 60. Which of the following describes the process of genetic engineering? The process of genetic engineering, I've seen the paper ended with a genetic question ever so often. Tissue sample is treated to promote growth of cell. Stem cells are grown and used to treat medical problems. Chromosomes from an egg cell are replaced by nucleus from a somatic cell. A gene is inserted into a vector, which is then used to transfer the gene to a host. I am going with B. And that takes us to the end of the 2016 biology paper. Please be reminded to read the comments below, and of course leave your comment there, as if there are any updates, that's where it will be posted. Also, ensure that you click the videos that follow. You're going to be finding the other part of this paper in those videos. Thanks for watching, and remember to like, share, and subscribe. And when you subscribe, remember to hit that notification bell and select all.